Jean Baudrillard, a French philosopher and a cultural theorist, had a vision of the world that's as unsettling as it is thought-provoking. Born in 1929, he lived through a time of profound change in media, culture, and consumerism. By the time he published Simulacra and Simulation in 1981, Baudrillard has crafted a theory that questioned the very nature of our reality in the modern world. For Baudrillard, individuality, as we typically understand it, is an illusion. We aren't truly unique beings with distinct identities. Rather, we're units in a vast system of media, constantly reflecting the images, ideas, and values that we're fed. Our purpose, not to create or discover something new, but to consume the endless parade of images, signs, and symbols around us. In Baudrillard's world, something is only real if it can be endlessly reproduced. What's unique, singular, or unshareable no longer exists. He introduces a fascinating metaphor to illustrate this loss of reality, the story of the map that overtakes the territory. Imagine a kingdom where mapmakers craft such an accurate map that it stretches over the actual landscape, layer upon layer, until it becomes indistinguishable from the land itself. We no longer view this map as a tool to understand reality. It becomes reality. Baudrillard says, but it is no longer a question of either maps or territories. Something has disappeared, the sovereign distance between one and the other. This collapse means we no longer allow a map to be an abstract representation of reality. Instead, we bend reality to fit our maps, reducing it to mere concepts and reproductions. We are no longer living in a world where being and appearance are distinct, nor where real and concept are separate. In today's digital world, reality can be generated by programs and simulations, and it no longer has a foundation in truth. For Baudrillard, it's no longer about imitation or even parody. Instead, we've replaced the signs of the real for the real itself. He calls this world the hyperreal, where the line between what's imagined and what's real is indistinguishable. We're left with a gigantic simulacrum, an endless cycle where reality doesn't exist in relation to anything solid or concrete. To grasp the hyperreal, think of paper money. Once, paper notes represented actual gold or silver reserves. But today, that's irrelevant. Money is simply paper with value because we say it has value. It's no longer a representation of anything, it just is. The reality of money, like many things in the hyperreal world, isn't based on something external, but on its own constant, self-sustaining cycle. In place of the real, we've made a fetish of the past. Baudrillard points out that our obsession with preserving history, like maintaining Egyptian mummies or ancient artifacts, is less about understanding the past and more about making ourselves feel that there's something substantial beneath all our simulacra. In essence, by keeping these real symbols, we try to validate our own existence. He describes this as Museumification, where we turn everything into an exhibit, dissecting and preserving it not because it has meaning, but because we need it to feel like we're connected to a real history. Take Disneyland as a perfect example. This theme park pretends to be imaginary, something separate from the real world, when in fact, it serves to make us believe that everything outside its walls is genuine. But it's really just another layer of the hyperreal world. It's a way for us to avoid facing the fact that even our society outside of Disneyland is part of this fabricated reality. When it comes to politics, Baudrillard pushes beyond typical critiques of capitalism. For him, capitalism isn't just exploitative or immoral. It's an unprincipled enterprise. Capitalism makes the economy, demand, and consumer confidence seem like pillars of society. But in doing so, it destroys traditional ideals of truth, morality, or justice in favor of a radical law of equivalence and exchange. We've become consumers, not citizens, yet we still cling to the illusion that we're active participants in a functioning democracy. To maintain this illusion, capitalism manufactures crisis to make us feel that this system of consumption is dynamic and responsive. Baudrillard even argues that political power, as we see it, is just an elaborate charade. The intense media coverage of elections and the fixation on politicians are distractions that mask the fact that traditional power no longer exists. Instead, power is woven into the fabric of the system itself. The last truly political events, Baudrillard suggests, were the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, where actual power seemed to be at stake. But in the hyperreal world, real deaths are necessary. A scandal like Watergate, which symbolically removed Nixon from power, became the model for the modern political death ritual. The media plays a central role in the hyperreal world. In 1971, a television crew spent months filming an American family, the Louds, documenting their lives for millions of viewers. The family fell apart, and Baudrillard points out that this collapse wasn't just personal, but a product of the hyperreal gaze of 20 million spectators. The producers claimed the show would be as if the cameras weren't there, creating a utopian reality that was, in truth, a brilliant fake. In this world of simulacra, real events blend with their portrayals. Take the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island, which echoed the plot of the film The China Syndrome. In Baudrillard's view, the line between the cinematic and the real event blurred, as each mirrored the other, creating a hyperreal truth greater than either one on its own. This blurred reality has only intensified with social media and the internet. Today, people's social value is often measured by their visibility in media. Baudrillard noted that anyone not constantly exposed to the media risks being desocialized. We consume media like we consume everything else, assuming it adds meaning, just as we assume the flow of capital enhances happiness. In one of his famous lines, Baudrillard says, "We live in a world where there is more and more information and less meaning. So what role does media truly play? Is it a tool of manipulation, as many argue?" Baudrillard goes deeper, suggesting that the real threat lies in its power to strip away meaning altogether. In this hyperreal society, advertising isn't merely superficial. It's the core of civilization, and the products it promotes are secondary to the signs and stories they represent. In Baudrillard's hyperreal universe, the individual as a rational, self-determined agent is a myth. We are, instead, entities entirely enmeshed in the fabric of media, technology, and consumer culture. Perhaps most disturbingly, this replacement of reality with hyperreality is what he calls the perfect crime. One that's almost invisible to us because, for most of us, the hyperreal is the only reality we know.